North Carolina Governor Beverly Perdue will not be running for re-election in 2012. We talk North Carolina governor's race, 2012 primary, the General Assembly, and Susan G. Komen here on the State of Mecklenburg at CLT Blog. We have a very distinguished panel of guests today to talk about the last week's events that had happened in the North Carolina political landscape. First, to my far right, Joel Ford, a political expert here for the Democratic Party and former Mecklenburg County Democratic Chair. To his left, Brian Holliday, a professional consultant who specializes in the Republican Party. And to his left, Miss Jennifer Daniels, who is a progressive strategist here in North Carolina. All right. The bombshell dropped last Thursday. I don't think I got off my NC poll hashtag the entire day until I walked into my class. What do we think here? Why do you think, Joel, that Beverly Perdue is not running for re-election?
Well, the governor outlined her reasons for not running for re-election, and they centered around the partisanship, the bickering that's going on right now in the General Assembly, and that she feels like that she can do a better job not running for governor and focusing on the core issue that she believes in, and a lot of Democrats in this state, and hopefully everybody in the state believes in, which is the core value of education.
Does that mean that the governor's job does not focus on education, and she can't do it she can't focus on education as a governor?
Well, I think what it means is that based upon the divisiveness and the hot political rhetoric that's going on right now in Raleigh in our General Assembly as it relates to how we should fund, at level we should fund public education, she disagrees with, and a lot of people in the state disagree with.
Now Joel, let's talk about that real quick. Let's go to education. We're going to come back to that now. The difference between the governor's budget and the budget that was passed by veto override for education was around $50 million, less than 1.01.5%. When you're dealing with the North Carolina governor and the General Assembly, there wasn't really a lot of difference in what they actually did, but there was a lot of really heated rhetoric. Jennifer, why do you think the rhetoric got so heated over the course of the last 2 years?
You know, I definitely think it was really based on ideology, and that concerns me as a mom, a parent. I think it was really based around ideology, and it got to a level that was rather unnecessary when ultimately it is about the children, and it is about education, and it is about funding. I don't know. I often do. I think about that a lot, and I think about what has gotten us to the point where we have managed to structure our conversations more around budgets and line items as opposed to the children and those who are involved. So I don't know. That was kind of distressing for me.
And that's interesting because it seems like we noticed it in the school board race here last year and in several issues in this General Assembly and governor's race that a lot of the rhetoric around for the children is being used. Brian, from a Republican standpoint, the fact that Bev Perdue will not be running, the fact that the General Assembly now is going to be basically given a lame duck governor to deal with, do you think that that's going to help those in the General Assembly, or do you think that the governor is going to basically use her pulpit to veto action items?
It will be interesting. I mean, they passed all those vetoes, overrides, through bipartisan support. So the question is, does a lame duck governor get more support or less support, and how is that going to break out? I would imagine that one of the things Tom Tillis will do right off the bat is just put all the vetoes right back on the table and see who's standing and have a. It's called lame duck for a reason, and he's running, so it will be an interesting power battle.
Well, it's interesting when I hear the Republicans talk about bipartisan support. Let's not confuse bipartisan support with about 2 or 3 conservative Democrats on the eastern part of the state as bipartisan support. It is far from anything from being bipartisan. This is an ideology that Speaker Tillis and the leader Phil Berger have decided that they wanted to dramatically shift this state's priorities as it relates primarily on education to one of more of a conservative one. And when you do that and you have the impacts that it's having right now, Larry, in our state, primarily in our university system, where we have larger class sizes, where we're laying off teachers and administrators in our public university system, in addition to the tuition is being raised for working class families here in the state of North Carolina, primarily because of these dramatic budget cuts. For instance, let's go up to Chapel Hill. 18% was cut out of their budget this year from the General Assembly. Okay. That's a $100 million impact on that particular university alone. We can go right here to UNC Charlotte, and similar cuts have had to take place. So again, I think we have to figure out as a state, which I don't think that the Republicans are listening to North Carolinians, because when you do polling, folks in this state say that education is our priority, and we're willing to pay for quality education.
And that is a very, very passionate opinion. And for anyone else who wants to share their opinion with us, we are currently live streaming. So if you tweet any of us at our handles or at the CLT blog hashtag, we will be paying attention and we'll ask some questions from the audience. But returning to that idea of bipartisanship, Brian, the Eastern Democrats have traditionally been a lot more conservative than the Western Democrats, and the Democrats from the rural areas have been more conservative than the Democrats from the urban areas. Given that the urban areas have started to gather more population, do you think that the Democratic Party is going to see a progressive shift over the course of this next campaign? Or do you think that they're going to continue to remain true to their conservative Eastern base?
It just depends on which part of the state you're in. I mean, there's still out east, there's just a lot of Democrats out there, a lot of conservative Democrats. It's interesting to hear Joel say that those conservative Democrats are part of this right-wing conspiracy with the Republicans. So that kind of comes back into play. But if you're not going to call that bipartisan support, I don't know how else you would label it.
I think I've articulated that two Democrats.
It was five, I think. It was five that had to vote with the veto override.
But you talked about all these other veto overrides, and it really fluctuates. But again, I think that there has been a dramatic shift in ideology in the General Assembly that I think that is going to come full circle here in 2012 on this year's ballot box.
Well, let's talk about the shifting, because I do want to return to what the Democratic Party does next. And Jennifer, as a progressive strategist, do you see this as an opportunity for the North Carolina Democratic Party to become more in line with the national party and President Barack Obama, or do you think that they're going to continue, like I said, to stay true to what their roots were? Are they going to try and find someone who represents the more urban areas, or are they going to go with someone like Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton?
Yeah, I think specifically for the Mecklenburg County Dems who represent us in the state, they all announced jointly that they're all running again. So kudos to them for that. And just thinking about who some of those representatives are, they are a lot more progressive and left of center than frankly, voters, and even in this county. So I think if for nothing else, that particular group of people will try to move the needle in the opposite direction, because they've seen what happens when they attempt bipartisanship. Some would call it capitulation. That some would be me. But I think they've seen what happens when they do that, when they try to extend a hand and they get, bitten on it or hit on it. So I think definitely the Mecklenburg County ones are going to try to move us to the needle.
I could argue successfully that the Democrats who have been in charge, and in particular the Democrats here in Mecklenburg County, I wouldn't describe them as being left of center. I would describe them as being right of center, primarily for two main reasons. One, this is a right-to-work state. And before the Republicans took over the General Assembly and wanted to rewrite our state constitution, we already had in our general statutes marriage being defined between a man and a woman. So again, I would go back to center right, not center left.
And Joel, you would be correct if at this point in time, and I'm going to go ahead and opinionize here myself, even though I'm a host, just for a second.
Really?
Yeah, just for a second.
Can't help yourself.
Can't help myself. I can't help myself here. Joel, you would be correct if the Democrats still continue to hold the General Assembly. I think that the electorate in this last cycle, 2010, decided that the Republicans were going to be more in line with their traditional conservative ideals and protect those, because I think a lot of the conservative Eastern Democrats were afraid that the new Democratic Party was going to change those very things that you say they care so much about.
They got elected off of a platform for jobs, and that's the last thing that this current General Assembly has done. They have done nothing to help create a climate or an environment that would be conducive to producing jobs. They've done everything else other than that. They've tackled social issues which are near and dear to their base, and it is losing this state, which will cost you the election in 2012.
Brian, what do you think about that? About the fact that you don't think the General Assembly...
think that the tax cuts in the budget are not social issues, and that's basically where the big fight broke down over. I mean, there are social issues on both sides, but where the big difference between the General Assembly and the governor was definitely over the budget and the taxes. She rolls out and says, we got to raise taxes, and this is what I'm running on, and now she says she's not running it. Dalton's running on that. The issue is going to be about taxes. The social thing is what people bring up to campaigns, but it's going to be about taxes, and the issue will be around taxes.
Two separate issues. One, we can set the budget to the side just temporarily, but if you take a look at the new legislation that this particular General Assembly has taken up, 95% of it has been social.
That is not true.
That is not true. And
Absolutely not true.
But, I mean, Joel, fracking,
social,
medical malpractice reform, the fact that we're talking about the earned income tax credit, the $50,000 for an individual or partnership.
They named NASCAR the official sport.
Yes.
That's not social.
To certain voters.
Racial Justice Act. voter ID,
gay marriage ban,
the gay marriage ban, this midnight session that you have to take away teachers' rights.
But you got to get up to 95%. You know how many more you have to go before 4 bills?
If you take a look at the
I'll give you 5%.
All right. We're moving on.
That was the major issue.
We're moving on. So, this battle that we're seeing here, take it out to the state. Who carries the flag now for the North Carolina Democrats against Pat McCrory, who just announced last night? Joel.
Well, I think we got a primary. Two candidates have already announced. Obviously, Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton, and you've got Representative Bill Faison. And we should hear this coming week, within the week, whether or not Erskine Bowles is going to get into it. And so I think that is up for the debate.
Jennifer, who do you feel the progressives are going to turn to in this time to see? Because Pat McCrory is leading every potential challenger except Erskine Bowles in the polls. So, who do you feel would be the best individual to be able to be able to? He's leading the polls.
He's leading over Erskine.
He's leading the polls because he's been running for 4 years and he's got $2 million.
Well,
people don't know who the opponent is.
You know who should run?
Who?
Purdue.
No.
She has the most money, she has the name recognition, and she's actually held the job before. Why aren't any Democrats calling on her to actually run? That's the interesting. No Democrats have come out and said, no, this is terrible, you can't run. I think there's scandal.
And honestly, that's probably what has, this is what I think. I think that actually has a lot to do with the fact why she's not running.
I think so, too.
What's going to
happen to all that $2 million now that she's raised?
Listen.
You know what Stuart Watson said on Twitter today? That money can be used for legal funds.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let's get back to who replaces.
Okay. So progressives would say Cal Cunningham because they want to pull him back up.
Okay.
The party is going to go for Erskine Bowles because they want a winner.
I noticed that because today it was tweeted that and was reported in the News and Observer that the Democratic Party had already purchased ErskineBowles.com and Erskine for NC or Bowles for NC. And I actually have to ask this as someone who's involved in the party, but it kind of has to deal with the fact that while being a party official, you can't endorse and help a candidate during the primary. Are either of you troubled by the fact that the party's already taken that kind of a step and seemed to show some favoritism for Erskine?
Yeah.
That is a bit interesting if it is true that the state party is getting involved at that particular level. But at the end of the day, it's really about us identifying a leader that can go up against Pat McCrory because I believe this is that because Pat McCrory has hitched wagon up to this Republican General Assembly, that is going to be his downfall.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You know who should run?
Who?
Kay Hagan.
Now that's an interesting point. Why has Kay Hagan's name not been brought into this conversation yet?
She has been brought and she hasn't turned it down. She can run safe. If she loses, she holds her Senate seat, and she doesn't have the best name recognition across the state, so it would actually help her in the next Senate.
But do you see her even thinking about stepping down from the Senate to take the governor's? I can't see that. I don't see that happening.
I don't see how that's going to be a viable option. I don't see how that's going to be a viable option for come out of the Senate.
2014 is going to be a tough battle.
North Carolina, especially when we've got some talent that we've got available. And again, I still say that this is not a shoe-in for Pat McCrory.
All right. No. Well, let's talk about Pat real quick. Let's talk. Okay, Bev Perdue and Pat McCrory. The polls were showing that he was up. I think it was the last poll was 41-36. Yeah. Was that the last one I saw from public policy polling? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the gap at the smallest was 6%.
And the reason why I'm not responding to you because at this early stage of the game,
it doesn't. I know polling doesn't matter.
Do not look at those poll numbers because you could take a look at the poll numbers in 90 days from now, 120 days from now, and then closer toward the election, and they'll give you something completely different. Yeah, those are fill-me goods for fundraisers.
And you know what? That's the other issue. That's the question though. Pat now has $2 million in the bank. Is Erskine Bowles the only one who can effectively raise money to combat Pat McCrory?
I personally think so. I think it's going to be an uphill climb for any other candidate simply because of the fact that Pat has been running for several years. But
to be precise.
Right. Don't
he would disagree with you on that point.
But don't discount the fact that just because he has the money means he will be able to use it effectively. He does not know who his opponent is now, and that was I think probably Pat was more surprised than anybody else at this table that she wasn't running because now his whole game plan has changed. Trust me, he has to throw the Purdue book out and start all over again.
I think that this is a sad state of affairs, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, is that we're talking about the money and the fact that the influence that money has in our statewide politics is the fact that you've got an individual, and perhaps if the governor was running, who already started out with $2 million, meaning that if you have a guy who's sitting at home right now on the couch watching the show with some great ideas, he really doesn't stand a chance, because and I think it's a sad state of affairs for us as voters as well, is because think about it, the individual who is able to hold a $100,000 fundraiser in his home gets a return phone call quicker than somebody who's an ordinary citizen, and that's primarily because of the influence of money in our politics.
And I would agree. And I would agree with you if all things were fair and equal in this country. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that money does run things. So, Ryan, as from a consulting standpoint, Pat McCrory does not seem to be facing a primary challenger. I don't.
Which is a surprise.
Which
No, it's not.
Yes, it is, because it can be
to any of us.
successfully
Not to
argued,
any of
as
us in
well
the
as
party.
was argued in 2008, that Pat is not a real conservative. And we've got 3 major projects in the city of Charlotte that I can point to right now. One is a $300 million underperforming asset in the NASCAR Hall of Fame that he walked point on as a Republican. He built the McCrory train line down here in the city of Charlotte, as well as an arena that he helped champion and build. And most conservatives, including Don Reeves of Mecklenburg County, would argue successly that he is not a true
But
conservative.
doesn't that make him the exact guy to run? Because he was able to take a town that was demographically very Democratic and be able to enact projects like that with the support of both business Republicans, business Democrats.
And I could
Doesn't that make him the
successfully-
strongest candidate?
I could successfully argue that is going against the traditional Republican conservative values of using that public money for such large toys as they have been described.
And that's what they would say in public, but what they're saying in private is they're looking at their plus ones, and they know that those type of
that
projects
race
will get
took
them
place
that.
in 2008. You had
It
Fred
did. You had
Smith.
Bob
ran.
Orr and Fred Smith.
He
That
had a ton of
debate
money.
played
He
out.
ran
It's
to the
over
right
now.
of him.
The
Graham
party
had a lot
changed.
of money. He ran to the right of him. The fact of the matter is, Charlotte has a huge media market.
Yep.
McCrory has name rec. And
there you go.
And that's
And
where
I'll
that's
even
where it
admit, I was out of full disclosure. I was at the actual launch last night. His message was simply, we're not going to. You can't. This was the greatest thing I tell you. He's got some great staffers. He came out walking up the thing to "We Won't Get Fooled Again." Hit the stage right when that song played. "We Won't Get Fooled Again." Talks about the good old boy, good old girl network of the Democratic Party. Talks about the 100 years of corruption run by the Democrats in the state. I mean, he's got some great strategies, and the Democrats have got some things to come back at him as well. But the question is now, just period question: if Erskine doesn't run, is that it? Is that ball game?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
I mean, because I think that really, if you look at either Bill Faison, who has the ability to raise money in addition to the money that he has on his own, and he also has the ability to travel. Most people don't realize that Bill Faison has his own plane. He's going to be able to jump across this particular state anytime he gets ready, and that's because of his self-made wealth. But the other big piece is Walter Dalton. I think that Walter Dalton is going to surprise a lot of people. He connects real well. He articulates. He is able to communicate in a manner that I think will resonate with North Carolinians. And again, at the end of the day, if you take a look at the numbers, the only way Pat McCrory wins is because Democrats stay at home. We have more registered Democrats in the state, and the unaffiliates typically are the ones who are going to be able to decide this particular race.
Faison came out and said Purdue's not running, and Democrats all called him crazy and
Which is
told him to go
interesting
away.
because I actually want to address that one point.
And
Brian's
Dalton
right,
came out and he pretty much says, "Hey, I'll do everything Purdue was doing."
And that's the question. That's another question. Is that let's just play this out. What if there are indictments? What if? Does that hurt the Democratic Party's ability to win, or does it help them because they say, "Look what we did. We got rid of this. We didn't want to have anything to do with this."
That would be my key message.
That would be your key message,
Yeah,
Joel?
certainly.
Well, I don't think I think it'll make news, and I think it'll make headlines. But just like anything else, then we'll eventually shift back to the core issues.
Okay.
I think that the Achilles heels for the Republicans in 2012 is going to be education. They picked on the wrong group of constituents. They should have never picked on the teachers.
Okay.
They should have left the teachers union alone, and they should have left the North Carolina University systems budget alone.
Okay.
They cut into education too much, and I believe that that's going to be their Achilles heel.
So
It's also going to be the downfall of Pat McCrory, because Pat McCrory has hitched his wagon to the Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly and has not deviated any off of whatever that they have done, and he has fallen in lockstep. So, in my opinion, so goes the Republicans in Raleigh, so goes Pat McCrory.
All right. So just to make sure I understand your argument correctly, the fact that in a time of $1.8 trillion deficit, the fact they had to make some cuts. And the NCAE came after those Democrats who voted with the Republicans. I mean, they came after the Democratic members. They mailed into those Democratic folks'
And
homes.
radio ads.
And radio ads. I mean, so you're telling me that the Democrats and the unaffiliated in this state are going to side with the NCAE and side with the Democratic Party over a difference of $50 million.
Let me see if I can make this plainer for you.
Okay.
Education has already been identified through credible polling sources as to be the #1 issue.
And I would agree.
You don't believe polls at this point.
70% of the individuals in this state have said that they're willing to pay more if it goes toward education.
All right.
The Republican leadership in Raleigh did the exact opposite. They have to be accountable for that.
Okay.
The #1 issue is jobs.
The #1 issue is jobs.
#1 issue is jobs.
#1 issue is jobs.
10% unemployment
Brian. Okay.
throughout 12% some counties. It's jobs.
Jennifer, what do you think? #1 issue.
#1 issue to me is the top of the ticket. I mean, we could all of this has to.
And I have to.
that's
I
a good
agree
point.
100%
Yeah,
with Jennifer.
it's
The
the top of
issue
the
is going to be the top of the ticket.
It's gonna be the top.
Which let's talk real quick. Florida was the last night. Romney won. No surprise. Romney won. Gingrich is not on most of the ballots for the rest of the primary. There's talk of Ron Paul continuing to the end, there being a brokered convention. This reminds a lot of folks of the 1980 race between Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter. Will that happen? Will that kind of result be what happens in North Carolina? Will they choose Barack Obama because he is the safe choice? Or will the eventual nominee, which it looks like it's going to be Mitt Romney, will he be able to compete with Organizing for America here in North Carolina? Brian.
What did Obama win by last time? How many votes was it?
Oh, it was close.
It was like 14. No, it was
14,000?
14,000.
Yeah.
So
14,000.
14,000. So you got bad unemployment. You got the convention here. I think that Barack Obama's strategy will be akin to George Bush's strategy in his second term, and to go out and find voters who typically don't vote but would vote for him, turn out those people, crank them up. I think we saw something similar to that here in Mecklenburg. I think that the question will come down is to those independents and conservative Democrats. Which way are they going to fall? I see North Carolina being a tough battle for Obama. Anyway, I see North Carolina being a ton of money Obama puts in to make the Republicans fight and spend money here that he's willing to lose because he's going to take Ohio or Florida.
Joel.
I see it a little bit differently. I see the fact that you've got 22 consecutive months of private sector job growth. I see the fact that this economy, including GDP, is on the upward trajectory. While it's not where we want it to be, but I think through his leadership and some of the policies that he's put forth, that he can make a credible argument that there's no reason for him not to be president of the United States right now, especially when you've got 32 million individuals who did not have health care, who now all of a sudden have access to that health care. So if you take a look at the organizing efforts in this state, which again I think was key to his victory in 2008 and doing it again in 2012, we've got a convention which is going to rally the troops around that Democratic theme and message. I think the interesting piece is whether or not the Republican presidential candidate decides to put some resources into the state of North Carolina, because in 2008, McCain ignored it, and obviously Obama was able to take it.
Yeah. It definitely is going to end up turning into a ground game, and Joel.
I agree with you 100%.
It's going to turn to a ground game,
It's going to turn to a ground game.
and it is going to be about who has more boots on the ground, who is more riled up for their folks. I think what's going to happen is, and it's funny because I'm thinking about Newt Gingrich's signs from last night, 46 states to go. But I'm thinking that this is, again, and we talked about it 2 weeks ago, this is going to kind of just keep needling away and just exhaust this process and just make it so long where by the time we even get to, the elections, it's, folks are going to run out of steam. And
no matter what happens, people are going to get, there's going to be voter
steam.
fatigue, which begs the question. We saw a reduction in turnout in Charlotte from 2009 to 2011.
Yeah.
We had historically high turnout levels in 2008. Will we see that again, or will voter fatigue and some of the rhetoric on both sides, will that cause some folks to just say, to hell with it?
I was speaking about this to some colleagues earlier today, and this is the voter fatigue, and I've been dealing with this. Is it apathy? Is it fatigue? Is it my vote doesn't really count? I don't know what it is with our voters today, and why so many folks stay home when these issues affect everybody. But I don't want it to be this way. But I do think this is going to be a year of low voter turnout, and it is literally going to come down to the last phone call.
Joel, you're shaking your head. You look like you're going to disagree.
I'm shaking her off because the trends in history don't support the argument, primarily because of every 4 years we have an uptick in voter turnout, primarily because it is a presidential election. The other thing that Brian, that I will argue is that you're going to have more voter engagement Think about the voter contact that is going to happen. That happened in 2008 with either the ads, the direct mail pieces, and the door knocking and the phone calls. We don't see that kind of activity, Jennifer, throughout the non-presidential elections, primarily because of resources. And we all know what moves voters off of the couch into the voting booths is that voter contact, and we will have more voter contact. We will also see that there's a greater emphasis, as Newt Gingrich likes to say, this is the most important election of our lifetime.
Every election is the most important election.
But I'm saying that it will be built up that way, but it'll be the resources that will motivate people to get out of the homes and to go out and vote.
The last couple elections have been wave elections. Democrats had 2 wave elections. Republicans had a wave election. I don't think this is going to be a wave election. I think it's going to come down and be a stand your ground election.
Yeah.
Democrats sat out last time. Republicans sat out before that. I think everyone's going to show up and stand their ground, and it's going to come down to fighting over those middles.
It's going to
if
be
you
like
don't want to get political mail, don't be registered independent.
It's like the movie, basically, which is why I get all the mail. But it's to me, I'm almost thinking of the movie with where he was the last voter, and who was that? Kevin Costner.
The one with Kevin Costner. Yeah,
that's to me what I see. And Joe, you made a point in regards to that. It's stuff's okay. No, the trends are going a certain way. I just think that we're at a different point in history. We're at a different point in history where this is literally a turning point in a lot of people's lives, and I'm seeing just the apathy manifest itself in other ways. And I don't necessarily think it's in the vote.
And I think in the folks in my generation, you're right. There's a lot of folks who are younger who are looking at this and saying, I don't believe a single word on either one of these jokers.
Yeah.
And that's sad. But let's move into another issue before we finish the last word. In the news today, last night it broke on Facebook, broke on Twitter. The Susan G. Komen Foundation will no longer be providing grants to Planned Parenthood for breast screenings. Really quickly, 30 seconds or less. Was that a good move? Was that a bad move? And why? Joel.
I think it's a personal business decision for that particular organization, for them to be able to redirect the funds the way that they choose. But the interesting thing about it is that Planned Parenthood has already made up that money through other sources. And so it'll be interesting, in my opinion, to see what happens to the Susan G. Komen Foundation's fundraising on a go-forward basis because of a lack of funding to Planned Parenthood. I think that's what we need to keep our eye on.
Right.
They'll get a bump. It's good for both of them. They both can kind of run to a base. They'll both get a bump. I know there's been pressure for years on Susan G. because they kind of straddle that middle, and they got a lot of conservative, ultra-conservative people behind that organization. So I think they've been looking for a reason for years, and they found one.
I won't say yay or nay to either. What I will say is it is up to us to do our due diligence and do some research so that we can really find out what's really going on behind the scenes as to why this is happening. And I implore everybody who's listening today to do a little bit more research.
Well, all right. Now we're going to move into the last section, a newer section here on the state of Mecklenburg called The Last Word. That's where I basically get up and editorialize, and it's going to be a section real quick. It's going to be about less than a minute. With Erskine Bowles jumping into the North Carolina governor's race, my hope for North Carolina and for the country as a whole is to get involved in a debate on our deficit. The greatest national security threat to this country has nothing to do with Iran, Iraq, Al-Qaeda, or any of the other social issues. It is the fact that we are facing a mounting debt that needs to be addressed in a bipartisan manner, and we need to come together as Americans to help deal with this debt, because we cannot leave the future of our country saddled, and we cannot leave the future generations of our country with a debt that they will not be able to get out from underneath. Now, I want to thank the panel for coming. Joel, Brian, Jennifer, thank you so much, as always, and thank you, as always, for joining us here at the State of Mecklenburg on CLT Blog. You have a good night.